Something unusual has been happening in the Sahara Desert. In regions that were once completely dry, scientists are now detecting signs of water. Satellite images show patches of vegetation spreading across areas that used to be bare sand. In some places, seasonal lakes are forming after rainfall. And in certain regions, underground water is even beginning to reappear closer to the surface. This raises a surprising question. Is the Sahara Desert starting to turn green again? At first, that idea sounds unlikely. The Sahara is the largest hot desert on Earth, covering about 9 million square kilometers, roughly the size of the United States. It stretches across North Africa and includes some of the driest places on the planet. In many areas, rainfall is less than 25 millimeters per year, and some regions can go years without a single significant rain event. But despite these extreme conditions, the Sahara has not always been a desert. Thousands of years ago, much of this region looked completely different. During a period known as the African Humid Period, which lasted roughly from 11,000 to 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was covered with grasslands, rivers, and large lakes. Fossil evidence shows that animals like hippos, crocodiles, and even early human populations lived in areas that are now completely dry. So what changed? The main driver is Earth's orbital cycles. Small variations in the tilt and wobble of the planet affect how sunlight is distributed across different regions. Around 5,000 years ago, these shifts weakened the African monsoon system, reducing rainfall across North Africa. Over time, vegetation died off, soils dried out, and the Sahara transitioned into the desert we know today. But the climate system that created the Sahara is not fixed. And in recent decades, scientists have started to observe signs of change. Satellite data collected over the past 30 to 40 years shows that parts of the Sahara, especially along its southern edge in the Sahel region, have experienced increased rainfall. Some areas have seen precipitation rise by 10 to 30% compared to the severe drought periods of the 1970s and 1980s. This increase in rainfall has had visible effects. Vegetation has expanded across parts of the Sahel, with grasses and shrubs returning to areas that were previously barren. Researchers using satellite imagery have tracked a measurable greening trend across large portions of North Africa. In some cases, temporary lakes have formed in low-lying desert basins after heavy rains. These lakes may only last for weeks or months, but they indicate that water is becoming more available in regions that were once extremely dry. Another important factor is groundwater. Beneath the Sahara lies one of the largest underground water reserves in the world, known as the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System. This aquifer contains vast amounts of fossil water that accumulated thousands of years ago when the region was much wetter. In certain areas, changes in rainfall and surface conditions may allow some of this groundwater to move closer to the surface. While this does not mean new water is being created, it can make existing water more accessible in localized regions. However, the situation is complex. Not all parts of the Sahara are becoming greener. While some areas show increased rainfall, others remain extremely dry, or are even experiencing higher temperatures and evaporation rates. Climate models suggest that warming global temperatures could intensify weather patterns, leading to both heavier rainfall events and longer dry periods. This means the Sahara is not simply turning green in a uniform way. Instead, it is becoming more variable. Some regions may see more vegetation and seasonal water, while others continue to face desert conditions. There is also evidence that human activity plays a role in these changes. Land management, agriculture, and reforestation efforts in parts of the Sahel have helped stabilize soils and support vegetation growth. Projects like the Great Green Wall Initiative aim to restore degraded land across Africa by planting trees and improving land use practices. These efforts can enhance the natural recovery of vegetation, especially when combined with increased rainfall. But scientists are careful about making long-term predictions. The African humid period developed over thousands of years due to gradual changes in Earth's orbit. The current changes observed in the Sahara are happening on much shorter timescales and are influenced by both natural climate variability and human-driven climate change. Some climate models suggest that parts of North Africa could experience increased rainfall in the future. Others predict expanding desert conditions due to rising temperatures. At this point, both trends are possible, depending on how global climate systems evolve. What is clear is that the Sahara is more dynamic than it may appear. Even the largest desert on Earth is not static. It responds to changes in climate, atmospheric circulation, and environmental conditions. In certain regions today, grasses are returning, water is briefly pooling on the surface, and ecosystems are beginning to reappear in places that were once completely barren. These changes are small compared to the vast size of the desert, but they are measurable, and they are real. The idea of a green Sahara may sound like something from the distant past, but the evidence shows that under the right conditions, the landscape can change again. For now, scientists continue to monitor rainfall patterns, vegetation growth, and underground water systems across North Africa. Because even in one of the driest places on Earth, the environment is still evolving.
The Sahara Desert looks like a golden sea from above. We see endless dunes, many blue and green oases, and a huge black spot that covers an area of 17,000 square miles. Wait, what? What is it? It's a pretty gigantic territory, but why have we rarely heard of it and never seen it in movies or documentaries? Perhaps it appeared recently. Oh no, this black spot is millions of years old. Let's go down and explore the area. This place looks flat from above, but it's extremely uneven. There are black hills, slopes, and strange, tall cones everywhere. Some of them reach a height of more than 330 feet. It's higher than the Statue of Liberty, and the highest peak reaches about 3,900 feet above sea level. All these formations seem to be burnt out. This whole area resembles a giant testing ground where something big was blown up, or where a large-scale fire burned. In some way, it's true. There was a fire here, not on the ground, but under it, and then it burst out. This entire territory is covered with molten lava. It came out of the ground and spread in different directions, burning everything in its path. Then, a new portion of lava came out and solidified on top of the previous layer. And so, with time, the lava formed a hill, a cone, and all the mountains located there. So, turns out this place is covered with small volcanoes? Kinda. There are about 150 of them. They're all extinct, and they're not exactly volcanoes. This place is called the Haruj volcanic field. But the volcanoes here don't look the way you imagine them. Here you can find different types: small vents, chimneys, and even shield volcanoes. Do you remember what shields look like in historical epic movies about ancient Greece or Sparta? These are round, flat plates with a smooth protrusion. So shield volcanoes look kinda like these inverted shields. They don't turn into a hill or a mountain because the lava coming from these volcanoes is low viscosity, more fluid, and consists mainly of basalt. It spreads further than ordinary lava and takes longer to cool. As a result of such lava eruptions, vast and massive structures appear much wider and lower than ordinary volcanoes. Some of the volcanic rocks here are up to 6 million years old. The most recent eruptions occurred only a few thousand years ago, so it's quite safe to wander around here and take photos. Probably. But why are there so many volcanoes here? Most volcanoes on the planet appear along fault lines crossing the Earth's tectonic plates. Imagine that our planet is like a jigsaw puzzle. Fault lines are the places where the puzzle pieces are attached to each other. When seismic activity occurs, red-hot magma comes out of those cracks, and at that moment, a volcano appears. Okay, so the Haruj volcanic field is a huge fault, right? No. The strange thing is, there's no fault line here. Moreover, it isn't even located next to any of those fault lines. Volcanoes here have a rather unusual origin. For some reason, a huge magma reservoir formed under this area, filled with a surge of molten rock, and there was so much of it that it began to bubble out from different spots. These were not explosive eruptions like those of ordinary volcanoes. Magma here poured out smoothly from numerous vents, turning the ground a dark, coal-black color. All the volcanoes here are extinct, but even if they were to awaken, it wouldn't be a sudden disaster. You'd most likely have time to escape. Okay, now let's move to the Karakum Desert, which is located in Turkmenistan. This desert covers about 70% of the country's territory. It's 135,000 square miles of sun-scorched, barren land. Even if you wander through these hot plains, valleys, and ridges for several days, you still won't leave this desert. But if you go to the north-central part of the desert, especially at night, you can see something fascinating. Already from afar, you will see a bright pillar of light, as if someone started a large-scale fire. You come closer and see a fantastic sight. A huge pit with bright flames. This place is called the Darvaza crater, and it's not a volcano. The fire has been burning here at night and during the day for weeks, months, even years. This huge pit burns 24/7 and attracts a lot of tourists. Nobody knows for sure how this crater formed, but the most popular story says geologists came here in the early 70s to drill for oil. They got to work, but the ground collapsed beneath them. 3 sinkholes appeared here and they started leaking methane. In small quantities, this gas is safe. It's used as fuel, burning in gas turbines and steam generators to produce electricity. In everyday life, this gas helps to heat houses and prepare food. But in large quantities, methane can cause health problems. It's colorless and odorless, and you may not notice that you're breathing it in. Methane is non-toxic, but it has a suffocating effect, which can lead to serious physical damage. Also, a methane leakage can harm the environment because it's a greenhouse gas. Methane emissions can lead to an increase in global temperatures and the greenhouse effect. So, let's go back to our geologist in Turkmenistan. You know those scenes where a fire hydrant breaks in the middle of the city or a pipe bursts and the streets flood with water? Those geologists had a similar accident with methane. A huge amount of gas began to seep from under the ground, and something had to be done about it. You're in the middle of a desert next to a huge pit where dangerous explosive gas is leaking out non-stop. What would you do? Set it on fire, of course. Scientists thought the fire would soon burn all their gas reserves and everything would be fine. They set it on fire and started waiting. An hour? A day? A week? A month? Years passed, but the gas continued to burn, and it was much better for the environment than invisible seepage. This place began to attract tourists and geologists from all over the world. Many scientists wanted to look at the eternal fire to examine it, and some of them did. In 2013, a Canadian researcher came there and found out that no one really knew how that funnel had formed. Local geologists said that the crater had formed in the 60s, but people began to talk about it only in the 1980s. Now it's impossible to find exact information about the origin of the fire pit because it's classified. Why? Good question. If you have the money and desire to go to Turkmenistan to see the Darvaza crater, don't rush to do it. After lots and lots of years, the crater seems to be calming down. But why? Has all the methane run out? Nope. The authorities just stepped in and tried to stop the leak. In simple words, they found a way to turn off the valve. Now, in satellite images, you can see that the fire is almost out. On the one hand, it's sad that now you won't be able to see it with your own eyes. But on the other hand, the number of fires in this region has decreased threefold. Okay, splashes of fire and magma in the middle of hot dunes don't seem strange. What about active volcanoes in the middle of icy plains and endless snow? On the territory of West Antarctica, scientists have discovered 91 volcanoes hidden under a 2.5-mile thick layer of ice. This makes Antarctica home to the world's largest volcanic ridge. All this ice is putting a lot of pressure on volcanoes and possibly holding them from erupting. But as we know, the temperature is rising all over the world, and the ice is melting. If it loses a lot of mass, it can trigger the volcanoes, which will then melt even more ice. This will lead to higher sea levels and many other problems. But let's talk about this in another video.
11,000 years ago, give or take, the most famous desert in the world, the Sahara, was all green and alive, with lakes, rivers, grasslands, and forests. Several thousand years later, it all changed. But then, in 1877, a Scottish businessman, Donald Mackenzie, got the ambitious idea to create a sea right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Mackenzie thought he could dig a channel from a lagoon near Cape Juby in northwestern Africa south to a large island plain. He thought this area was very low, about 200 feet below sea level. If he flooded it with water from the Atlantic Ocean, he believed it would create a giant inland sea, about the size of 60,000 square miles. His idea was to use the new sea for commercial navigation to West Africa, which had plenty of valuable resources and markets with huge profits. Even though Mackenzie had never visited the Sahara himself, he read about other dry desert areas below sea level, like Tunisia and Egypt, which had salt lakes called chats. But the businessman was wrong about how elevated the plain was and didn't receive enough investment, so he didn't bring his project to life. A French geographer named François L. Roder and a diplomat who developed the Suez Canal came up with a similar idea a year later. Roder was inspired by Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, who mentioned the Bay of Triton in his writings. It's sort of an Atlantis of Africa, as there is no proof it really existed, and no one can tell where exactly it was located. The salt plain could have been the seabed of the Bay of Triton, and they could bring this sea back to life. So the French crew thought they could dig a channel from the Mediterranean Sea into a seasonal salt lake in present-day Tunisia. Water would flow into dry basins and create an inland sea. They were hoping it would be around 3,000 square miles in area and 75 feet deep. It would definitely require a huge amount of water. The new sea was supposed to turn the dry desert into a flourishing garden. The climate in the area would become cooler, and there would be more rainfall in the region. And here comes the best part for the French. They'd replace trade caravans with steamships and generate more profit. The cost of this project would be almost $1 billion in today's money. Some people got worried that this new sea would create swamps full of dangerous bacteria. The French authorities stopped the project when they found out that many areas that would be involved were not below sea level, and the plan was just impossible. Now, some people were also afraid it could tilt the Earth on its axis in a dangerous way, or cool down Europe to the point there would be a new ice age. But the idea lived on, and most recently, Egypt was considering flooding the Qattara Depression in eastern Sahara through a canal or tunnels from the Mediterranean Sea. Water would evaporate quickly because of the desert climate, and a controlled balance of inflow and evaporation would let them generate huge amounts of hydroelectric power. But the project involved using atomic power to carve the new channel, and it didn't come to be. Famous writer Jules Verne described the flooding of the Sahara in his final novel, Invasion of the Sea. In the book, the scientists didn't proceed with their plans to turn the desert into a sea, but an earthquake did the job for them. So if the book comes to life, we might go swimming at a new Sahara sea resort in the future. Another massive flooding project has to do with Lake Erie in Australia. When it fills up completely, it becomes the largest lake on the continent. It happens only a few times a century, and when it does, the lake has the same salinity as seawater. When it dries up, it becomes extra salty. There was an idea to flood Lake Erie with seawater using a big canal or pipeline. It was supposed to make more water evaporate, and it could bring more rain to nearby areas. But when scientists did their math, they saw that the extra rainfall would be very small. It is so tricky because Lake Erie is below sea level, and the area gets really hot, so lots of water evaporates every year. This means salt would build up very quickly, and the canal could get blocked by all the salt. If a big canal sent water to the lake, it could create a small sea, but without removing the salty water, the lake would collect tons of salt every year. In 1930, several British scientists suggested freeing 100,000 square miles of the North Sea from water. Huge dams were supposed to stop the water, and rivers flowing into that sea would be diverted somewhere else through canals. There would be a railroad connecting London to Berlin and a bridge across the English Channel. Antwerp and London would keep their access to the sea, and Rotterdam would lose its busy port. This idea never became a reality, but quite recently, one Dutch and one German scientist came up with a similar project. Their idea is to build a dam that would be 295 miles long between North Scotland and West Norway, and another section between West France and southwest England. The scientists did some math and figured out that the project would cost somewhere between $276 and $552 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, but it could save around 25 million people living in 14 European countries from high water. So if we spread that budget over 20 years, the cost would be 0.1% of their combined GDP. And although it looks like science fiction, we already have the technology to build something like that. The depth of the North Sea between France and England is hardly over 328 feet and is around 416 feet between Scotland and Norway. We can already build fixed platforms in depth over 1,600 feet, so it should be fine. This project would turn most of the North Sea into a huge freshwater lake with no tides, and it would mean huge changes in its ecosystem. Plus, it would become more expensive to ship goods across this sea. The fishing industry would lose huge amounts of money, and it would also cost a lot to build huge pumps to transfer all of the river water that currently flows into the North Sea to the other side of the dam. So, the best that scientists can do is monitor the situation and hope there won't be a need for such a dam. Meanwhile, a German architect and engineer came up with another huge dam idea in the 1930s. It was supposed to completely change the inside of Africa with giant inland seas. The plan was to build a huge dam on the Congo River where it flows through some deep, narrow valleys after joining with the Kwa River. This would create a massive lake that would be bigger than the states of California, Nevada, and Oregon combined. Once this giant lake filled up, it would overflow into another river, which would then pour into the Sherry River, one of the rivers that feeds Lake Chad. Lake Chad would grow much larger, just like it was believed to be 10,000 years ago. The water would flow from the lake through Algeria and Tunisia right into the Mediterranean Sea. This new river would be big enough for ships to travel. It could replace trains or planes and would make it much easier to move goods and people across Africa. Back then, people didn't think much about how this could hurt nature and focused on how it would help the economy. Now, if you were to check out the Sahara from space right now, instead of a barren wasteland, you'd spot a surprising sight. Dry land sprinkled with some lakes and rivers in Morocco and Algeria, all thanks to some heavy rains in early September 2024. These aren't oases. This is just the Sahara going back to the factory settings. Believe it or not, eons ago, one of the biggest deserts on Earth was actually a lush paradise full of greenery. Let's first see how the Sahara turned into a desert. During the last ice age, Earth was much colder, and big ice sheets covered a lot of the land. At that time, the Sahara Desert was significantly bigger than it is today, and on our planet there were fewer tropical forests. And the cooler temperatures changed how rain was distributed in the tropics. Now, normally, warm air rises in the tropics, which helps create rain. Since it was colder during the Ice Age, this system got, messed up, and less rain fell in some areas. This caused more dry and desert-like conditions in places that are usually wetter. There was also a lot of dust blowing around in the Sahara Desert, which scientists found in old ocean sediments. But about 12,500 years ago, something surprising happened. The dust levels went way down. This meant that the Sahara got a lot wetter, which is a sign that the climate suddenly warmed up for a while before cooling down again. After 12,500 years ago, the Sahara became a much greener place, like a savanna, because a weather pattern called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a mouthful indeed, moved north during summer. This wet period was at its best around 4,000 years ago, when temperatures were a bit warmer than today. At that time, more rain fell in the Ethiopian highlands, which made the Nile River carry more sediment. However, there was another big change called a Heinrich event, which caused the Intertropical Convergence Zone to move back south. This led to the Sahara and Arabian regions drying out quickly. Because of this, the Nile River had much less flooding between 2700 and 2100 BCE. Long story short, well, too late for that. The Sahara has gone through wet and dry cycles due to changes in the climate and weather patterns over thousands of years. Up until recently, we've known about the Sahara in its dry era. But in September 2024, an unusual cyclone rolled through. It hit Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya, and filled those dry lakes and rivers. The satellite images from NASA of before and after the rains are stunning. It's like the Sahara has had a makeover. Some areas in North Africa received up to 8 inches of rain. For comparison, Seattle gets about 40 inches per year, only 5 times what the Sahara received. I say only for one simple reason. Seattle has a reputation for being quite rainy, while the Sahara does not. The tricky part is those 8 inches. Essentially, the entire yearly quota for this area fell in a matter of moments. So, in a way, it might have felt rainier in the Sahara than in Seattle. The mountains funnel the water into ephemeral lakes in northern Algeria, which recently expanded to over 70 square miles and reached depths of more than 7 feet. That's enough water to sustain it for a year. So what exactly are these ephemeral lakes? Well, they're basins that fill up for a short time each year, but might stay dry for several years if the rain doesn't cooperate. Sometimes water flows into them from a small surrounding area, or it can just be good old-fashioned rain. Now, a big question arises. How come these lakes exist in the first place? Well, generally they form because there's excess water trapped on the surface. But the soil in the Sahara is incredibly dry. Shouldn't it act like a sponge? It must be thirsting for moisture. Well, think about how eagerly your potted plant drinks up water when you return home from a vacation. However, no matter how parched it is, dry soil can only absorb a limited amount of water, which is often quite small. And just like your potted plant, it doesn't necessarily drink it all. You might simply be overwatering. Or, if you check the saucer below, you could find a mini flood. Another significant factor preventing the soil from absorbing water is the lack of vegetation. Under normal conditions, trees, shrubs, and various plants help retain moisture. In the desert, however, it's nearly impossible. There may be a few palm trees, but that's about it. This also explains the formation of those temporary lakes. Precipitation that isn't held by plants accumulates in low-lying valleys and depressions, creating these fleeting bodies of water. These lakes may only last for a limited time, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't have names. For instance, the beautiful lake adorned with swaying palms that you see is called Lake Yasmina, located in the oasis town of Merzoga. In certain areas of the desert, where the dunes rise, it may appear as though you're looking at a mirage, but it's not. The sand dunes are partially covered by water. Remember how I mentioned 8 inches? Well, that's not entirely accurate for some regions. In fact, there are places where the flooding is so extensive that the palms are submerged up to their crowns. Now, the last time we saw a downpour this intensive was 30 to 50 years ago. But this rain is more than welcome. After 6 consecutive years of drought, Morocco really needed it. Lakes that had been dry for decades, like Lake Ariki, are finally getting some much-needed water. A recent analysis revealed that out of the hundreds of storms that have hit the region since 2000, Only 6 brought enough rain to start filling up this lake. And of those, only 2 resulted in a lake level higher than what we saw in September 2024. So while this torrential rain seems like a blessing, the big question is, will it last? The answer is yes. When humid air from near the equator meets the hot, dry air from the north, the Sahara Desert tends to get more rain. Scientists say this collision zone is shifting further north as the planet warms, and it warms, so it's likely to keep moving that way over the next couple of decades. So I seem a bit overly optimistic about this, and the truth is, the news isn't entirely positive. The reality is that no one was truly prepared for a flood situation like this. Moreover, remember that this isn't some Southeast Asian country where people are accustomed to dealing with water. This is the bone-dry Sahara. That said, I think you know what I'm getting at. Tragically, at least 18 people lost their lives to the intense rains in southern Morocco. The authorities are gearing up for even more heavy rain in the region. But if that's the case, could it mean the Sahara is facing extinction? And what would that even mean for us? It might sound a bit strange, but our planet actually relies on deserts, and the Sahara is no different. At first glance, it may seem like a barren wasteland, and it's nothing to write home about. But deserts play a crucial role in our ecosystem. They act as major carbon storage sites and are considered net carbon sinks, with the Sahara alone holding an estimated 1 trillion metric tons of carbon. In the fight against climate change, these existing deserts are like a buffer, helping to keep the temperatures within acceptable levels. Yeah, deserts are scorching hot, but they act as the world's air conditioning. Plus, desert sands are an unexpected source of nutrients for lush areas like tropical rainforests. Believe it or not, scientists have found that the sand particles from the Sahara have a hand in nurturing the Amazon rainforest. These particles travel across the Atlantic Ocean, riding the winds all the way to South America, where they enrich the soil in the Amazon basin. Without the Sahara, experts believe the Amazon rainforest could face serious collapse. The Sahara Desert is like a Mad Max movie. Scorching heat, endless dunes, and an overall barren wasteland. A place where no one could live, right? Well, forget all you know about it, because 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush paradise of grasslands, lakes, and rivers, and the home of a ghost civilization that vanished without a trace. Our tale begins in the 1930s, when a Hungarian explorer stumbled upon a cave in the middle of the Sahara. Inside, he found something bizarre: ancient rock paintings of people swimming in a lake, surrounded by giraffes, hippos, and crocodiles. At the time, everybody shrugged it off as some symbolic depiction of the afterlife, because, really, who would imagine a lake in the Sahara? Well, fast forward some 70 years later, when a group of archaeologists made a discovery that flipped the script. In a rock shelter in Libya, they unearthed 15 mummies, along with baskets, ceramic pots, and other everyday items. This may look like prehistoric junk to most people, but to archaeologists, it was like uncovering a key piece of evidence. Those people weren't just passing through, they lived here. You see, those weren't just any mummies. They were some of the oldest naturally mummified humans ever found, dating back over 7,000 years. Take that, Egypt. 2 of them still had readable DNA, preserved thanks to a rare natural mummification process, almost a miracle considering the Sahara's climate's ability to turn everything into, well, beef jerky. Scientists struggled to understand where those mummies came from for a while, because the mitochondrial DNA they recovered was not helpful at all. But thanks to scientific progress, they eventually managed to do a full genome analysis that revealed some weird secrets. Those people belonged to a human lineage that was completely unknown, and they lived isolated from the rest of humanity for thousands of years. For decades, researchers assumed that the place where they lived, the Green Sahara, was like a prehistoric highway, a lush corridor that humans and animals used to migrate between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean. But the mummies demolished that theory, like a hippo sitting on a sandcastle. Their DNA showed zero genetic mixing with sub-Saharan and Eurasian migrants. keeping their genes pure for 7,000 years. Their closest genetic relatives weren't their neighbors living right below the famous desert, but some ancient hunter-gatherers from Morocco, and even some guys that lived in the Czech Republic, when it wasn't even a country yet, 50,000 years ago. We're not out of the woods yet, because those mummies also carried some teeny-tiny traces of Neanderthal DNA, just 10% of the amount found in modern Eurasians. Now, if you paid attention in school, then you know that Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia, and early humans only mixed with them after migrating out of Africa. But those green Sahara folks never left Africa. So how did they get Neanderthal genes? The leading theory is that their ancestors mingled with Neanderthals in North Africa 50,000 years ago before settling in the Sahara and cutting off contact with the outside world. Archaeologists also found cattle bones and tools made of stone and wood at that rock shelter, proving that those people led a thriving pastoral lifestyle. This discovery made scientists scratch their heads for a while because, you see, animal domestication was not developed in Africa. So how did they learn it if they never mingled with anyone? Did they have ancient YouTube tutorials? Probably not. The researchers believe they must have traded knowledge with neighboring groups, but just knowledge, no saliva. It's almost too hard to believe that no outsiders mixed with them. After all, who wouldn't want to live in a thriving civilization in the middle of a green paradise, drinking milk, eating meat, and even using animal blood as a protein source? Ooh, yummy. They didn't have to hunt for every meal, thanks to their livestock, and the abundant water made life pretty sweet. And yet, they never married outsiders. Why? Maybe it was a cultural choice to never date outside their own group. Or maybe the landscape itself kept them isolated. This is where scientists place their bets. They believe that the dense forests and rivers that existed in the green Sahara acted like nature's no trespassing sign, creating a geographical barrier that isolates animals, plants, and whole societies. This isolation is the reason why their genes were so unique. These guys weren't swapping spit with anyone else. But this genetic time capsule almost didn't survive. For most of the last ice age, the Sahara was even harsher than today, a true dead zone where humans couldn't survive. 70,000 years ago, even the toughest people disappeared, retreating to the Nile Valley and the Mediterranean coast. Why? Because Earth was a climate bully. Massive glaciers stole all the moisture, weakening monsoons until rain clouds barely reached North Africa. Then came the knockout punches. Armadas of icebergs flooded the North Atlantic, triggering devastating droughts each time. This was the Sahara's ultimate keep-out era. Now, you're probably wondering how in the world the Sahara turned green after all this, and then went back to being a desert again. Well, it all started 15,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, when Earth was shaking off the last ice age. Our planet's axis was a bit wobbly, and because of that, the northern hemisphere got closer to the sun, getting extra sunlight and heat. This eternal summer turned North Africa into a giant moisture magnet, pulling water from the Atlantic and making it all rain down on the Sahara. The result of this ridiculous amount of rain was a lush savanna, complete with lakes the size of small countries. But the African humid period was not just a one-time miracle. The truth is, this eternal on and off switch between green and desert happened to the Sahara more than 230 times since the desert was born. During one of these events, the Sahara even expanded, getting bigger than it is today. So when the green Sahara showed up, you can bet it brought the ultimate ecosystem glow-up. This wasn't just a light dusting of grass. We're talking full makeover. The transformation was so complete, it even reshaped animal populations. Cheetahs suddenly struggled with the new prey dynamics, while rodents like the multi-mammate mouse thrived in the suddenly abundant grasslands. But don't pack your prehistoric swim trunks just yet. This paradise had teeth. The Sahara was an ecological maze of crocodile-infested rivers, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and big cats lurking in the tall grass. Crossing it would have been like playing a real-life game of Hungry Hungry Hippos. This is probably why more groups didn't settle permanently. The Sahara's climate cycled between wet and dry every 20,000 years, hardly a stable zip code. For most ancient people, it was smarter to treat the green Sahara like an all-you-can-eat buffet, grab resources and leave before the desert returned. Still, this green Sahara period lasted for 10,000 years, giving our mystery shepherds plenty of time to thrive. But around 5,000 years ago, Earth's axis shifted again, the rains moved away, and the Sahara dried up faster than a puddle in July. As the desert returned, the shepherds from the green Sahara had no choice but to pack up their livestock and leave. Some researchers believe they migrated toward the Nile, laying the groundwork for ancient Egypt, so I guess their legacy lives on. Besides, their pure lineage may be extinct by now, but some faint genes of the mummies can still be found in the people that live in North Africa today. But the introvert mummies were not the only ones using the green Sahara as an Airbnb. They actually had neighbors just around the corner, in a lakeside village in Niger to be exact. Those people thrived for 5,000 years and left behind the oldest Sahara Desert cemetery, including a man buried in a turtle shell, a grinning Halloween man with filed teeth, and a heartbreaking family embrace frozen in time, victims of the very waters that sustained them. Eventually, those people disappeared too, just like it happened to our antisocial friends. This proves that this desert outsmarts everyone, with a landscape that gives paradise with one hand and takes it away with the other.
We all grew up believing that Stonehenge is the world's most ancient observatory, but now it has some serious competition for the title. Nabta Playa was built more than 2,000 miles away in southern Egypt, and thousands of years before Stonehenge and even the pyramids of Giza. In 1973, a Bedouin guide stumbled upon a strange group of huge stone formations while crossing the Sahara Desert. He led American archaeologist Fred Wendorf to the site, located about 60 miles from the Nile. Wendorf's friend and colleague claims the team found the stones while stopping for a bathroom break in the desert. Either way, what they found changed history. At first, Wendorf thought the stone structures were just natural formations. But then it hit him. This area was once a lake, meaning no natural rocks should even be there. He kept coming back to the site for decades, and by the early 1990s, his team finally uncovered a circle of stones that seemed to line up with the stars in a way no one could explain. After 7 long years of trying to crack the mystery of the site, Wendorf reached out to an expert in archaeoastronomy. They study how ancient people used the stars. One evening, while the expert sat in the cool desert sand staring at the stones, he realized that they formed a pattern radiating outward from a massive burial mound. One by one, as they dug into the sediment, the buried megaliths started lining up like spokes on a wheel. The team had already used radiocarbon dating to test samples from fire hearths and tamarisk wood roofing found inside the stone circle. Nabta Playa had dozens of standing stones, all a few feet tall. Some of them lined up exactly with the sunrise on special days, and others matched up with bright stars in the sky. Inside the big circle, there were 6 special stones that may have been used for rituals or marking important times of the year. Around them, 29 standing stones might have worked like a simple calendar to help people know when it was time for something important, like the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. When the sun rose in just the right spot, it was a sign that the rainy season was coming. The stone circle once aligned with the brightest stars in the northern sky: Arcturus, Sirius, and Alpha Centauri. Some stones even pointed to the constellation Orion. By tracing Arcturus's movement across the sky, they figured out that it matched perfectly with the circle around 4800 BCE. That means it was the oldest astronomical site ever discovered. And the people of Nabta Playa may have been watching the stars thousands of years before telescopes were even invented. It looks like it had a huge meaning for people living and traveling through the desert. Over 10,000 years ago, the long, cold, and dry ice age that lasted for tens of thousands of years was finally fading away. Northern Africa got massive monsoons and rains that filled up seasonal lakes. So, parts of the desert turned into short-lived oases. For the nomadic people who roamed this harsh land, these summer rains were everything. Their entire way of life revolved around cattle. When archaeologists opened the central tomb at Nabta Playa, they dug up cattle bones and even a massive rock carved into the shape of a cow. The people who built it used the stars to guide them and find hidden watering holes like Nabta Playa, which likely held water for about 4 months a year, starting with the summer monsoons. But there was no North Star back then, so instead they navigated using bright stars and the way the sky seemed to spin in circles above them. When the lakes were full, the standing stones would be partly submerged, and from the western shore, you would see the reflection of the stars on the dark water. Nabta Playa is way less famous than Stonehenge, perhaps because its stones were buried and the famous site in England was open to visitors for thousands of years. Sadly, when Nabta Playa did become famous, some tourists ruined parts of it by moving stones around, which messed up the ancient star alignments. To protect it, the authorities moved everything to a museum where people can see the stones and the carved cow statue without damaging them. The Egyptian observatory isn't the only construction similar to Stonehenge. It has versions that were used for different purposes, from Germany and France to the US and the Andes in northern Peru. This last one is actually one of the oldest big structures ever built in this region. The circular plaza is made of 2 giant stone walls arranged in a ring. It was likely used for ceremonies and gatherings. Scientists have carbon dated it to be about 4,750 years old, which means it was built before the Great Pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. The plaza had 2 entrances and a special layer of clay, soil, gravel, and charcoal underneath. It was carefully planned and built. Archaeologists also found ceramic pieces, quartz crystals, and gemstones at the site, so it was definitely a special place. People visited it for centuries, but at some point it was sealed off, probably because of changing beliefs and traditions. The most recent discovery was the remains of a large timber circle roughly the same age and with parallels to Stonehenge, all the way up in Denmark. This open-air structure was likely part of a special area where prehistoric people from the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age gathered for rituals and ceremonies. The circle was made up of 45 giant wooden posts, forming a huge ring about 100 feet wide. The wood is gone now, but scientists believe tall timbers once stood in the holes and created an impressive wood henge. No one knows exactly what these circles were used for, but archaeologists have found animal bones and food remains at similar sites. So people probably used to gather there for feasts and rituals. In 2024, scientists found 2 ancient stone circles from the Neolithic period in Dartmoor National Park in England. Some archaeologists believe they might form a sacred ark. Many of Dartmoor's stone structures were built in a curved shape on the high ground in the center of the area. A long time ago, Dartmoor was covered in forests, so people may have used the high ground as important markers. One of the newly found circles fits inside this ark, but the other one is outside of it, to the north. This could have been an entrance point into the ark. There's also a raised bank of earth near the stones, which looks similar to other famous Neolithic sites, like the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland and Stonehenge itself. This means the people who built these circles may have visited Stonehenge or been inspired by it. Archaeologists in Oman found ancient stone monuments called tralith, which got the nickname Arabian Stonehenge. They were finished about 2,000 years ago, but no one knows for sure who built them or why. Scientists also found stone hand axes that are incredibly old, between 300,000 and 1.3 million years old, from the time when the first humans left Africa. At another site in central Oman, archaeologists discovered a Neolithic tomb from around 5,000 to 4,600 BCE. There are 2 chambers with the bones of dozens of people inside beneath a giant megalithic structure. Nearby, they also discovered rock carvings that were made by people who lived in the area. And then there is another Stonehenge look-alike, this time in Saudi Arabia, that was used as an apartment complex thousands of years ago. Archaeologists discovered a total of 345 stone circles by looking at aerial photos of a lava field. Each circle is between 13 to 26 feet. and has at least one large standing stone in the middle. These structures still have remains of stone walls and doorways. Stone circles like Stonehenge are often linked to ceremonies and rituals, but scientists say that many early houses were actually built in round shapes, and rectangular homes only became common much later in history.